that, ladies and gentlemen, is how we'll make millions. Hello everyone, my name's KleinStein, and today I'll be talking about a long-forgotten game called Growtopia. How it became popular despite only being made by 2 people, and how it eventually died down. This is the rise and fall of Growtopia. What is Growtopia? Well, Growtopia is a game, and at its core, it's a game all about growing trees, if you know what I mean. Well, it's not actually about that. Or it is, but just not those kind of trees. See, in Growtopia, you start out in a world like this. And the only thing you can really do is punch. But if you punch a tree or enough blocks, you eventually get a seed. And if you combine the right ones, you get a new tree, which will grow, and after a certain amount of time, you can punch it again. And you get new blocks and new seeds. And that is essentially the gameplay loop. It gets a bit more complicated than that, but not for the reasons you might think. More on that later. But first, I want to take you back to a simpler time. A time where people were watching Annoying Orange and listening to Gangnam Style. 2012, because Growtopia's story starts in 2012, with a guy named Seth Robinson. After completing his latest game called Tanked, which was a multiplayer game about tank warfare, he gets an idea. What if he capitalized on his newly found networking skills by making a simpler game? Perhaps something 2D. And that's where he makes 6 mock-up screenshots, outlining the premise of his new game, originally called Buildo. There was only one problem. While working on Tanked, Seth felt exhausted from doing everything all on his own. He was looking for someone who could provide him with mutual motivation and who could handle the artistic needs for Buildo. Seth went on to present the mock-ups to his friend and fellow indie game developer, Mike Hommel. Eventually, Mike agreed to join Seth on this project, and they started developing Buildo. Now that we know who made Growtopia, let's look at the timeline to explain some things. Development started in early September of 2012, and in the beginning Seth had estimated that the game would be finished within 4 to 6 months. Now, normally he would have laughed at that naive estimate, because games rarely get finished that quick. But this wasn't the case. They actually succeeded to make the game within this time frame. The reason for this is that Seth and Mike had both worked on 2D platformers in the past. There were very little unknowns. Also, using Seth's Proton SDK, they could ensure that the game would run on 8 different platforms right out of the box. What is Seth's Proton SDK, you might ask? Well, to oversimplify, it's a converter that makes games run on multiple platforms without needing to reprogram them in different programming languages. So, development went really smoothly, up until late November of 2012, when they ran into a problem. As luck would have it, someone was already using the name Buildo, so they needed to come up with a new name. After a very painful few days, they finally agreed on Growtopia. Seth states that he really couldn't get anything done during this period, and that the stress of finding a new game name really got to him. Through the Wayback Machine, I was able to find out who was using Buildo at the time, and what I found were these weird troll-face quest-type educational mobile games. When searching for Buildo nowadays, all I can find is some Italian software company. But after this, things continued going as planned, and the game was released on iOS and Android in January 2013. For me to even be able to talk about Growtopia right now, it needed to have been more than just a mobile game about breaking blocks and planting trees. And it was, because Growtopia, underneath its simple gameplay mechanics, is actually a very social game. Remember when I told you it gets a bit more complicated? Well, I'll try to explain that right now. See, Growtopia isn't actually only about the farming and combining of seeds. No, it's also about making worlds with the blocks you discover, and on top of this is a single currency economy. In this case, they're called gems, which can be purchased with real money. But interestingly enough, each item, including seeds, blocks, and everything in between, also has a certain gem value. More desirable items will of course be worth more gems, and you can make about $3 worth of gems within an hour. So due to the fact that people can visit any world, including yours and vice versa, street cred is a real thing, and the game quickly turns into a hustle, trying to make enough gems to be able to buy those desirable items. And that's where a lot of people, realistically speaking children, get hooked. And even if all that wasn't enough to make Growtopia's popularity grow, it still remains a social game, where you can chat with people from around the world. As seen in the past, social games have a potential to go viral. A good example of this is VR Chat, which, despite not really having any gameplay mechanics, still went viral, with a peak player count around 46,000 players. And believe it or not, Growtopia actually had a peak player count of almost double that. It all started with a teaser video that Seth and Mike made for the release of Growtopia. Multiple game bloggers decided to promote Growtopia and shared that teaser video, which formed the stepping stones of Growtopia's success. After the initial marketing, Seth and Mike watched as the users online grew. They'd stress out about whether or not the server would die from the sudden increase in players. They ended up having to upgrade their server 3 separate times, and wondered if they might need to go back to a cheaper one after the initial surge of players. During this time, Seth and Mike were constantly working on the game, putting out fires and reading over 600 forum posts a day. On top of that, Growtopia had an extremely sensitive virtual economy, which was a recipe for disaster. A single server crash could cause an hour of lost work per online player. A single day rollback on a busy day would mean instantly vaporizing 7 human years worth of efforts. That's actually mental if you think about it. Things like that weighed very heavily on Seth in the beginning. He claims he had trouble sleeping and would check on the server throughout the night to make sure it was still running correctly. After a while though, he reached a certain level of numbness with it all. After Growtopia got out of the starting blocks, there are a few events that Seth highlights in an article he made. The first major event was the first time somebody built a penis. I'm not even kidding. He wasn't actually mad or anything, he was sorta proud even. Having his own creative tools misused like this put a smile on his face. He did, however, ask them to take it down. He also states, as our player count grew, we found our player discipline tools inadequate. Over time, we beefed them up. Let me just say that I love the fact that even though we had them remove the penis, he secretly loved the fact that they've given people the ability to have dumb fun with a game and some friends. After this, they had a problem with, in my opinion, one of the most creative muting systems ever created. Seth decided that instead of simply muting people, it'd be much cooler to visually duct tape their mouths shut. The end result wasn't what they expected though. Being duct taped quickly became the goal. Seth says that when people saw us, they'd mob us yelling obscenities, hoping to get taped. So obviously they had to make a new rule. If you try to get taped on purpose, we'll just ban you. What I find noticeable is that Seth doesn't react like you'd expect a game developer to respond. He simply tells everyone that, hey, you'll get banned if you try to abuse the system. But all this pales in comparison to what happened next. On February 23rd, 2013, Seth and Mike had inadvertently made some changes that caused certain very cheap items to give out a high number of gems when recycled. This essentially created an infinite money glitch. Yes, an already unstable economy with no premium currency just got its already inflated currency made basically worthless. As soon as it was noticed, someone broadcasted it, which meant that every single person online knew how to get unlimited gems. The entire economy was trashed in only minutes. They had to roll back almost 24 hours. Seth did automatic backups daily, and normally he did extra backups before serious patches, but for some reason he didn't this time. That weekend was nicknamed Apology Weekend, and they worked hard and quickly to add perks and gem bonuses to try and make it up to the players. They even made a special item called a rollback plaque that they gave to people who lost progress on that day. They also wrote a program to restore all gem purchases that had been wiped, with double the amount of gems. After this, things quieted down a bit, until mid-April when Growtopia had 2,000 concurrent users on weekends, and the server began to buckle. A round trip to punch something could take a full second, and people were constantly being disconnected. They decided that Seth would write a version 2 of the server, when they could take more advantage of their hardware. Meanwhile, Mike would handle running the active game, adding items and preparing to move them over to the new server. They had a lot riding on the version 2 server. Would it really solve all their problems, or would it fail miserably? It's very difficult to fake 2,000 users. So they decided to release a client upgrade that could switch smoothly between the new server and the old one. When everything looked good, they just pressed a button and switched the real database over to the new server. If it died, they could simply switch them back. Anyway, it worked beautifully and it didn't outgrow it. Seth explained it to users on our Facebook page. Yes, Facebook, that's how you know this is old. Like this. Old server, new server. Note that it was only a software update and they didn't actually change any hardware. After changing to the newest version of the server, Growtopia's growth didn't slow down. In the 5 months since Growtopia's release, 3.5 million worlds were created by nearly 400,000 users, and they hit a peak of 65,000 hours logged in one day. And that's not even the peak of Growtopia's popularity. Oh no, it gets better. A year and a half later, they were regularly hitting 40,000 players online and 300,000 daily users. And eventually, after 3 years of steady growth, Growtopia being such a success, caught the attention of a certain software developer. That's right, our favorite video game company, Ubisoft. Seth and Mike admitted in an interview that the game was becoming a bit too big for them to handle, and they sold it. At this point, the apex of Growtopia's popularity was hit, as they were regularly hitting 70,000 online users. The main reason they sold is because they're programmers and artists, not bosses and entrepreneurs. They simply didn't want to deal with all that stuff, which is totally understandable. The exact amount they sold it for was never disclosed, but there are estimates from $1 million all the way up to $6.5 million, which would have been split evenly between Seth and Mike. Ubisoft ported the games to all major consoles, Switch, PlayStation, and Xbox. But after this, things kinda went downhill. The game had already run its natural course, and people were losing interest fast. On top of that, botting became a real problem. Since there's real money to be made, a portion of the players had the idea of making bots that could farm for them, so they didn't have to do anything. Ubisoft took measures to prevent this, but the damage was already done. Growtopia's player base had already halved by this point, and nowadays Growtopia only has around 10,000 active players, but from what I gather, there is still bots mixed in the number. I wouldn't call the game dead though. Now, the definition of a dead game is kind of controversial. For example, for a one-person game studio, 50 active players is super busy and the game is as alive as it can be. For a AAA studio though, 50 players means the company is being shut down, the coffee machine is being sold on eBay, and the CEO is living out of a cardboard box. Ubisoft acquiring the game also didn't help for another reason. Seth and Mike were super passionate about the game, and Ubisoft being a company isn't trying to make Growtopia the best game that they can be. Their first goal is to make money, which I don't blame them for. A company's gotta make money, but it's not a real passion project like it was in the beginning anymore. I could go on and on about all the updates Ubisoft did to the game, new items and economy changes, but I don't feel like that would add any value to this video. Instead, I'm gonna give my subjective opinion about the game. It's shit. And I say that in the best way possible. It's shit like how Cookie Clicker and Flappy Bird are shit. It's not a AAA masterpiece, but that's also not what Seth and Mike set out to do. But it is fun. And I think at the end of the day, that's what video games are all about. Having fun. Thank you all so much for watching. I was KleinStein, and if you made it this far, please subscribe, like, and follow me on my Twitch where I stream every weekday.